Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger. We're even closing in on 1,000 followers, which seems like a very small number on Instagram, but it's been an arduous climb. So we're going to enjoy every little step as we start to grow that channel this year. And it's Tuesday. Tuesdays on Hawk Blogger Mornings means it is an FTN Mike Randle Tuesday where we get to talk about playmakers across the NFL. We get to talk about what's going on from odds makers. We get to talk about fantasy football and so much more. Mike, man, welcome to the show.
Brian, it is great to be back. I should start paying you since your Seahawks just continue to roll. You're 3-0. You're great in DVOA per Aaron Schatz here at FTN, both sides of the ball. It is good to be a Seahawk fan today. Well done, my friend.
Yeah, well, I wish I could take credit for it. I appreciate the thought. I think that Seahawks fans in general are enjoying it. There are definitely a damaged group that is wary of buying in too much because their fear is that they're going to open up their hearts to hope and it's going to be crushed when they start facing real stiff competition. And this week we get to see it a little bit with the Detroit Lions. Lots to go over there, but before we get into it, I'm kind of curious. Every week I'm curious how the FTN model does in terms of predicting outcomes. How did it do this past week, week 3?
It gave back a little bit this week. It's still way up on the season with prop sides and totals. I had a couple unfortunate things, Brian, and it happens. For example, we love the under in the Ravens-Cowboys game. That absolutely should have went under, but things happen at the end. They give the points back, and the game goes over. So we had a little bit of unfortunate luck. That's going to come, but we still trust our process, and there are some fascinating sides and totals this week that maybe we'll get into where we see edges, but still overall a great year for the FTN model. Again, sides, totals, and props continue to roll, and we run it 10,000 times. We've done it for week 4. Let's see what happens.
Well, why not get into that right at the jump? I actually, every week we do this, and I'm able to do this because I'm a subscriber. If folks want to be a subscriber as well, it's a great time to do it. All you got to do is go over to ftnfantasy.com. New promo code. So if you've tuned it out, you got to pay attention. If you want to get your 15% off, you got to use HBAM. HBAM. Hawk Blogger Mornings is the idea there. HBAM is the promo code, gets you 15% off, gets you access to all the DVOA, all the Discord channels where you can talk to folks, all the fantasy football stuff if you're into that. But really for me, it's about Stats Hub. It is about DVOA. And then I've actually enjoyed getting access to what we're going to talk about right now. I'll share my screen and look at the odds and look at what the model is saying for this week. So if we take a look here and we scroll down, I always scroll down because I want to see the Seahawks. That's the first thing we want to see. And I'll even zoom in a little bit for folks who might not be seeing this all. So we've got the Seahawks against the Lions. Spread opened at 4.5, Mike. It is down to 4, and not really an edge. Like probability-wise of the Lions covering right now, the model says about a 53% chance that the Lions will cover the 4-point spread, but that's only calculates to 1% edge. And remind folks, like 8%, 10% is when it's a high enough probability that you'd want to maybe consider putting money on it.
Yeah, between 8 to 10%. 10% the double-digit spreads, edges are really where we want to put our money. Anything over 5% is a play, but 8 to 10% is really the focus. So this projects to be a close game. And I think it's tough, Brian. I do, because what you've seen with all the teams this year is when they look great, they do eventually regress. Tampa Bay, perfect example. And when they look poor and they struggle, they bounce back and have a good game. Washington did last night against the Bengals. So this is a tough spot for Seattle. But to that point, notice the edge is not overwhelming on the Lions either, because last year, what was it, week 2, overtime, Seattle played well out in Detroit. So it's two really solid teams. We do project the Lions to win, but it's right there at that number. I think it's going to be a great game.
Yeah, I think the spread's going to move, and I think it's going to move towards Seattle.
Okay.
And I think the right place for it to end up normalizing is about -2 for the Lions.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see if it moves that much. But the Lions got some pretty significant injury news yesterday. Frank Ragnow, their all-pro center, sounds like he won't play in this game, might be out for a few weeks. That is a big deal. They've got some other issues. The Graham Glasgow, their guard, who would likely be their new center, move over. He played last week against Arizona with a sleeve on his arm and talked about how much pain he was in during that game. Who knows if that will limit his ability to snap the ball? Will they have to go to what would be a third string center? Whether Glasgow will be able to play or play up to his standards is another question. And then they lost, they lost some guys on the other side of the ball. Derek Barnes, their starting linebacker, is out for a period of time. Not sure if Onzarike is going to play. Brian Branch is in concussion protocol, but it sounds like he's doing better. There's a lot of questions. I think the Seahawks are probably going to be without Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams. That's just my guess, which is massive on their side. But they should be getting Kenneth Walker back. They might get Uchenna Nwosu back. And as you said, Geno Smith and the Seahawks have beat the Lions in Detroit each of the last 2 years. Last year, they did it with Jake Curhan and Stone Forsythe as their only starting tackles. So I really think that while the story's going to be, Mike, that the Seahawks haven't played a good offense yet, I ask you, what defenses has that Lions offense faced?
That's correct.
They have faced Arizona, the Rams, and the Bucks. That's not exactly a murderer's row of defenses that the Lions offense has faced.
Yeah, and the injuries are real. And Seattle has the ability to put points on the board. You can poke holes on both sides here. Seattle winning this game, Brian, and playing well in Detroit would establish them as an elite team in the NFL, because there are 3 things you need to do to be an elite team. You have to beat the teams you're supposed to beat. You have to win at home, and you have to beat someone that you are not supposed to beat. Seattle's not supposed to win this game. They've had a phenomenal start. They're 3-0. They could go 3-1 and still have a great start. Detroit had Super Bowl aspirations clearly before the season started. They match up well. Geno's played well. Kenneth Walker coming back is huge because you have to be able to run the ball against Seattle. That's going to open up your offensive attack with Metcalf and Lockett and JSN. This is a great matchup, and your defense is playing exceptionally well. I believe right now, number 2 DVOA here at FTN. It's a great matchup between 2 really good teams. People, the public, is going to think that Seattle is going to come in and maybe give it up and lose their first game. But I think this game is very close for the reasons that you said, and Seattle could stamp themselves as a legit Super Bowl contender by winning this game. Totally true.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting matchup, and we'll see. I haven't done all my detail work on it, but I think the Seahawks are in a better spot than I think most people understand nationally. Another game that I want to call out here, talk about, that Rams game, I'll tell you, Mike, that gave me life.
Yep.
That was just the extra boost I needed after the Seahawks had a big win to see the 49ers blow that game.
Gave you a 2-game lead, Brian. Not only gave you life, it gave you a 2-game lead in the division.
Loved it. And I was looking at the spreads last night. This one caught my attention. 49ers at home against the Patriots. Not a surprise that they are heavy favorites in this game. I have some questions. The 49ers just lost Javon Hargrave. They've got nobody they already were having problems on the defensive line. They're already having problems defending the run. Now you have a New England Patriots team that loves to run the football, that breaks tackles. You have a team that plays pretty good defense and has excellent cover corners in the secondary. And nobody's expecting the Patriots to make it a game. Nobody expected the Rams to make it a game either. And look what happened. I just have some questions. That 10 to 10.5 point spread seems massive. And if you look at the edge here, Mike, it's coming pretty close to something to maybe put some money on.
I'll tell you what makes me even more nervous, Brian, is I'm in a survival pool. There's survival pools all over the place where you pick one team to win each week and move on. You can't pick the same team twice. Decimated, Two Gun, one of our big guys here in DFS who goes in the Circa Millions contest in Las Vegas, eliminated last night, had two entries left, both with Cincinnati. This makes me nervous. The advantage I'll give you is I do think that teams that have a rookie head coach that are young, obviously quarterback, wide receiver concerns, that's a tough ask to come across the country and beat San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan. But the model loves the 10.5, 10 now. I like the 10 as well. I think that's too many points.
Another factor here, Mike, if you believe that Jared Mayo is a good coach, and I actually think he is, he's had almost a week and a half. He had a Thursday night game. He got to watch that 49ers game. He's got to dial things in. They got to get a little healthier. I think that that's a game that could be closer than a lot of people want to believe it will be. Let's take a look at one more here. We'll look at the Cardinals against the Commanders. We've got Arizona as the 3.5 point favorite. We just saw Jaden Daniels make history last night. Do you think that the Commanders have a chance to go in there and surprise some people in Arizona?
Brian, you can look at it on FTN. We talked about my early season predictions, one of which early was that the Seahawks were not going to be as good, but then later I sort of walked it back because I got the feeling they were going to be pretty good this year. The one I held fast with was that Washington's going to win the NFC East. And my argument was going to be Dan Quinn is a good defensive coordinator, which he is. The defense played well last night. And Jaden Daniels is what we don't know. We don't know how to prepare for Jaden Daniels. Last night he was efficient. The running was an issue. Brian Robinson, he finally connected with Terry McLaurin for fantasy owners. So I think Washington is legit, but I will tell you, Brian, this is a classic buy low on the Cardinals, sell on Washington, because we just saw the Commanders win on the road against the Bengals, and we saw Arizona lose to Detroit. So this is the classic spot maybe to go in on the Cardinals. But I know you're rooting for Washington to keep it going. Two mobile quarterbacks. One big difference, Joe Burrow, fairly stationary. Kyler Murray, not. So let's see how that Washington defense does, facing a different type of challenge this week with Kyler Murray and the Cardinals.
Yeah, both these teams are pretty fascinating to me, Mike, because you and I both were kind of on the Commanders. Week one, they made me look like an idiot when they got rolled over by Tampa. And I was like, okay, well, I really thought the Commanders might go in there and surprise people, and they didn't. But they haven't punted for the last 2 weeks.
Yep. No turnovers, no punts. Yep.
That's right. And now they are looking. I don't think it's crazy that they could end up winning that division. Sure. I think the Cowboys look out of sorts. Terrible. I think the Eagles are paper tigers. And so there you go. Wow, I didn't know. Now I know.
It was a gift. I'm waiting for my Seahawk one from you, Brian.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we'll work on that, Mike. But I think that the Commanders, it's a tough ask to go in there, but I think it's not totally out of the realm. Let's do one more because I do like to do all the AFC or NFC Wests. Let's take a look at where the Rams and Bears are. I was a little bit surprised, Mike, that the Bears are 3-point favorites in this game at home against the Rams. I think the Rams have the better quarterback. The Rams definitely have the better coach. How are we sure about this spread? Do they have the right team favored in this game?
I'm going to tell you why. The reason is that the Bears defense has been one of the most underrated groups in the NFL because the offense has been so bad for Chicago. They're playing very well. They play well at home, and they force turnovers. Still questions on the Rams' offensive line. I don't know if they're going to be able to run the ball that well against the Bears. They're not going to have Kupp. They're not going to have Nakua. So this is based on the Bears defense. And Brian, I've seen it before. You know, that Bears offense started clicking late in the Colt game. It was a little too late, but it did start to get going. Wouldn't be surprised if this is Caleb Williams' best game. I agree. A lot of points here. That one I do lean to the Bears because I think their defense is that good. They can force turnovers. Played very well in Houston on, I think it was Sunday night last week. So that's what that pick is. And the Rams coming off the big win, the big emotional win, now going to Chicago. Again, you want to fade what you saw in the prior week. That's all.
All right, folks, if you haven't already, way to get access to all this info is using the HBAM promo code over at ftnfantasy.com. Gets you 15% off. I am a subscriber. I think you're going to want to be too. Mike, who are the guys that kind of caught your attention in week 3? Guys that maybe people should be paying attention to on their fantasy teams?
Yeah, a couple things, Brian, and you mentioned it. Perfect segue before. If we study this, we love football. It's our passion. All of us, fans, everyone here who watches, don't give up on your preseason projections and thoughts over the first couple weeks. So what we saw this week were a couple big performances by players who had maybe disappointed to this point. Terry McLaurin finally exploded, got on the board. They don't have a second wide receiver of substance. Luke McCaffrey, I guess, he's going to be a major part of this offense, and he got on the board last night. 2 big passes, one for the touchdown, one that could have been a touchdown, the 50-yarder earlier in the game. Second, Dallas Goedert. Tight end is such a shallow position. Dallas Goedert, Brian, went from 2 disappointing weeks to the current overall tight end 1 in fantasy because of 1 game. That shows you how bunched together tight ends are. No A.J. Brown in that game. Devonta Smith knocked out with a concussion. Dallas Goedert finally established himself to where we think he can be. Now he's number 1 tight end overall. A little high for him, but he certainly should still continue to do well. Jawan Jennings with the Niners. No Deebo Samuel, no problem. Jawan Jennings, Randy Mossing people, catching balls over their head in the middle of the field. 3 touchdowns. He had a great performance. We'll get into him in a little bit. And finally, also with the tight end position, Tyler Conklin. We talked about Aaron Rodgers. He needs another receiver. Garrett Wilson, they're taking it away. Mel Kiper probably very upset at ESPN with the 2 high safeties taking away those passes. But Tyler Conklin, someone who can be reliable for Aaron Rodgers. He had a nice game as well against the Patriots on Thursday night, 90 receiving yards, a little bit over.
So we're into this time of the season where there's opportunity to move guys around. There's enough tape out there, enough weeks, enough points that you can say, all right, I got some guys that are playing really well, but maybe I've got a little concern about whether this is going to last. And maybe I want to sell high. And then there's other guys that I might be feeling are a little bit are a little undervalued, and I want to try to go get them and see if somebody will give me a deal because those guys have been underperforming. Who are your kind of sell high or buy low players right now?
The sell high players are simple. First is Chuba Hubbard. And I like Chuba Hubbard for the Panthers. Played very well, had a career game over 160 total yards and a touchdown. But Jonathan Brooks, the 2nd round running back they selected from Texas, is eligible to come back after this week. He may not come back right away, but I think he probably cuts into Hubbard's workload. So I'd be looking to trade him if you had him. Alec Pierce has been superb for the Colts, sort of a feast or famine guy. Still caught 1 pass this week for 44 yards. But with Josh Downs returning, Alec Pierce is, if you could throw him in a deal, maybe a 2-for-1, and somebody would take him, I don't think his impact is going to be strong for the rest of the year either. Zach Moss, enough of Zach Moss. I remember a running back named Justin Forsett, Brian. These are guys who are decent running backs. They're okay. But when they're put in the lead role, they just don't measure up. Chase Brown finally got going last night for the Bengals. They're 0-3. I expect them to see a little bit more Chase Brown. Zach Moss got in the end zone last night, which is great. You can sell him if somebody needs a running back. And also Cole Kmet. Gerald Everett has that connection with Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator. So I think Everett is going to continue to play in that offense. And I don't think Cole Kmet game, although it was fantastic, something like 10 receptions, 90 yards, I don't think that has the staying power. So if someone needs a tight end and they think that was the Cole Kmet breakout game, I don't see it. I think Everett's still a factor. You can sell high on Cole Kmet.
I'm curious where you're at on Zach Charbonnet after, he didn't have great performances from a Seahawks fan standpoint against the Patriots, but he's gotten in the end zone a couple times, and you don't know with Kenneth Walker if he's going to stay healthy. What's your take on Zach Charbonnet?
I liked Charbonnet at the beginning of the year. I thought he was someone who could, in the event of an injury, step in. And there are very few players in fantasy football that when the lead running back gets hurt, they ascend to the full workload. Look at the Chiefs, for example. Is it Carson Steele? Is it Samaje Perine? But Charbonnet has proven that if Walker is hurt, he steps into the full workload and is able to find the end zone. I like him as a flex play moving forward if Walker is active. And I think the Seahawks are going to learn, like every other NFL team has, there is no benefit to having one running back take 65, 70% of the touches. We've talked about this. Look at the Jets. You have Breece Hall. He's great. Braylon Allen is a problem. And I think Zach Charbonnet is a problem. Walker returns. I think you should see your typical 2 series for Walker, 1 for Charbonnet, 2-minute drill, Charbonnet. So I think he has sort of secured his floor over the last couple of weeks by finding the end zone, even though he wasn't super efficient. And I think they're going to want to keep Walker healthy. So I think Charbonnet is a flex play moving forward with obviously running back 1 value if Walker gets hurt again.
So turning our attention to the Seahawks as a team, what were your impressions of the game this week, and what are your thoughts about this matchup with the Lions?
Yeah, it was a great win this week. You jumped on them very early. Did not know with the long rest with Mike McDaniel, maybe he would have something schemed up, but he didn't. Limit the turnovers is obviously the key. You can beat this Lions secondary with your cadre of receiving weapons, and I think you must be able to establish the run game. That's critical to keep balance. I expect the Seattle defense to continue to play well. Number 2 in defensive DVOA. Number 5, I believe, in offensive DVOA. So the key that's made me a little nervous for this one is we can't have those early turnovers, Brian, with Geno Smith. We can't have an interception, something like that. But if you win the turnover battle in this game, I think it's a 1-possession game with a minute left to go. And that's all you can ask for. And you could be winning in that situation. But you have to be able to control the ball, because this Lions offense at home in a dome with Gibbs, you saw the hook and ladder last week with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Gibbs. They get cooking here, and this offense is going to score. So I think that's the big issue for me. No turnovers. Don't give them a short field. And you're right there.
That hook and ladder was one of the prettiest plays you're going to see all season. Really, really well done. And you don't see that often. And I'm actually going to ask Coach Macdonald about that tomorrow when we get to talk to him again. But yeah, interesting note about the turnovers. As well as the Seahawks defense has played, they have not taken the ball away the last 2 weeks. And so I think that is something that they've got to get back to. They had 3 in the first week against the Broncos, none since then. So I think that's a big one. Anything on FTN data that people might want to know about? Anything that has caught your attention one way or another this week?
Yeah, I looked at our stats hub, and I'm trying to find how teams play against opposing wide receiver ones. I not only used our stats hub for target share, but I used defensive DVOA against opposing wide receiver ones. Found some interesting things. Miami, you torched them, and they are now the worst team at defending wide receiver one. Cincinnati, awful as well. But if you look at the top there, teams that have played well, you've done a fantastic job against opposing wide receiver ones. You've done a great job against opposing wide receiver 2s and wide receiver 3s. One of the most consistent pass defenses in the NFL, 2, 8, and 9. Even Pittsburgh, Brian, who's number 1 in terms of defending against wide receiver 1s, they are 25th against wide receiver 2s. So your ability to not be picked apart by one specific wide receiver from the opposing team is absolutely critical. It's a tribute to Seattle and the coaching staff, what they've done. There is no weakness here. I usually look at that and try to figure out where I can find a prop with a player over. Seattle has just been tough. So how they address it this week, can Sam Laporta play for tight end? Is he going to be ready to go? That's going to be critical for the Lions because you don't give up big plays. I'll be surprised if Jamison Williams is streaking down the sideline on a bomb on this Seattle defense. I don't see that happening.
It's a great call out because we talked about this last week a little bit. The Dolphins were 32nd in the NFL in defending wide receiver ones. DK Metcalf sure looked like he took advantage of that.
Right away. Game. Yeah, right away. Game is over. Yes, very true.
All right, so let's take some user questions. We will start with one from Super Chat from Eric Tams. This is a question for Mike. What are the top things Seattle can improve to increase the projections in the model? Trying to decide how much I should worry about the O-line.
Yeah, the issue I would see, Eric, is not only the protection, obviously giving time. We talked about this after the first week against Denver. You know, you want to make sure your offensive line gives your quarterback time. I'd like to see some more short hits as well, attacking with JSN. Tyler Lockett, very, very useful last week as well. And I think the big thing, the obvious, is having Kenneth Walker back there. because the defenses are going to respect Walker more than they are Charbonnet, because he can pound you over and over again, which is what you saw Brian Robinson last night with Washington. He opened some stuff up down the field for them for the big play, as well as for Jaden Daniels. So offensive line needs to play well, get the ball out of Geno's hands quickly, and really be picky with those shots, because you've seen they've been perfect against New England, against Miami. Those big shots come, they don't miss, and he's played so well, Geno. Just got to give him some time.
All right. This question comes from Brendan, and these questions people get to ask as being either subscribers on patreon.com/hawkblogger. They do that every Monday. We get to post a thread, and people in the Slack channel get to ask questions. Or if you're a club level or higher YouTube member, you also get a chance to ask questions. And Brendan asks, can you give us 1 to 2 guys underperforming that it's too early to jump ship on, and 1 to 2 guys that should be dropped immediately?
I'll give you several. We could spend the whole show on this, Brian. Number one, you cannot give up on the Jag players. I understand that Jacksonville's look terrible. They look terrible against Buffalo. Everyone's jumping ship. You can't. That is a good offense. Evan Ingram's going to come back. Christian Kirk got unlocked last night. This is a good team. You want to buy low on them as well. Same thing with Miami. I have seen here, people are dropping Jalen Waddle. How is that possible? Tua may come back, or they may get Ryan Tannehill. They're going to do something. So I'm looking for players and teams that people are jumping ship on way too much. You can't leave a player like Jalen Waddle, was a top 3 fantasy draft pick on wide receiver, and now we're just dropping him. We're giving up on him right away. I think that's a mistake. I expect the Packers offense to click. I talked about the Packers offense, how much I loved it. Jordan Love coming back. Christian Watson has legit top 10 wide receiver upside. You saw him catch a touchdown with Malik Willis this past weekend after getting shut out the week before. I think Christian Watson is somebody you should not drop as well. In terms of players that I think you may want to move on from, I never liked DeAndre Swift. I thought he was a product of the Lions offensive line and then a product of the Eagles offensive line. He's looked horrific. Ran backwards on the inside the 10-yard line for a loss of 11 yards this past weekend. Roshan Johnson was active. Khalil Herbert still there. No interest in DeAndre Swift. And as much as it breaks my heart, Brian, I love my Chargers, but I don't think you need to keep Gus Edwards if J.K. Dobbins keeps playing like this. Gus Bus was someone who was going to get the goal line carries, get the majority of work. It looks like it was Dobbins against the Steelers. Edwards didn't get much. If Dobbins gets hurt, I think they'll go with Edwards and Kamani Vidal, the rookie. But as for right now, that's J.K. Dobbins' backfield, so you may want to move on from Gus Edwards.
I think it's a great point about Miami. I think a sneaky part of that team was picking up Huntley from yes. the Ravens, or I think that's where he was. But in any event, I think he is going to be their quarterback if Tua does not come back, and I think he's got some upside to him to at least make them a functional offense. All right, next question comes from Amy. What should we do with players that score no points, like Andrews or Shaheed? Do you just wait to see what happens, bench them, or hold on to them, or trash them ASAP?
Do they have a history of success? Mark Andrews finished as the overall tight end 1 in fantasy a few years ago. Mark Andrews has a history of production. Maybe he's injured, but you can't give up on Mark Andrews. Now, on the flip side, Rashid Shaheed is fine, but he's hit a lot of big plays. He hasn't been a consistent part of that offense. So if you wanted to move on from Rashid Shaheed, I'm totally fine with that. Chris Olave is getting involved more. You know, Juwan Johnson's going to be involved. Taysom Hill's going to come back. I'm fine with that because I don't see a history with Rashid Shaheed of elite production. Dropping Jalen Waddle or getting rid of Rashid Shaheed are a chasm apart. So I want to keep players. I don't care if they've underperformed, that have a history of production, because I think they will regress, as we say, to the back of the card, to what they've done historically.
All right. Brendan has another question here. Do the massive issues at QB for Miami affect the, quote, instant start status of Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle? We kind of touched on this a little bit. What's your thought there?
I would ask the person, if you're Mike McDaniel, what would you do? The answer is you have to get the ball in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle's hands. You have to, because you can't win otherwise. So Tyreek Hill can easily get passes behind the line of scrimmage, slants, reverses, jet sweeps, anything. So because those two players are so critical to Miami's offense, I'm going to trust the head coach and the coaching staff to get the ball in their hands. Do you have to lower expectations? 100%, but don't give up on them. they're going to return and they're going to get some good fantasy production, even though they have questions at quarterback.
This question comes from one of our YouTube club level members or greater. Rick says, do you start Jaden Reed or T. Higgins?
I'm high on the Packers. It depends what you need. If you feel that you're coming into this matchup and you're way behind the team you're facing this week, the boom week is T. Higgins. That's the player. I don't like T. Higgins, but he's the guy who could go off and have the 8 catches, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Jaden Reed had that in week 1, but it was only on 3 receptions. There's too many other receivers in that Green Bay attack. So if you needed a safe, solid week because you have some other boom players like a Kyron Williams, somebody like that, DK Metcalf, then you can go with Jaden Reed. If you needed a big performance, I lean Higgins.
All right. What team does FTN see differently and with its data than the Vegas odds makers in general?
It's the Chargers. And right now, the Chargers, our biggest edge that we have coming into this week, we have the Chargers +8 at a 13.6% edge. That game is a little tricky because Derwin James is now suspended because of the illegal hit. Joe Alt is banged up. Rashawn Slater, Justin Herbert, I get it. But we have circled this game for a while. The Chargers should play very well against the Chiefs. We think the Chiefs are a little bit overvalued as well. I mean, that should have been pass interference against Atlanta. They should have lost to the Bengals. They didn't look fantastic against the Ravens. It's just Isaiah Likely's toe was out of bounds late. Otherwise, maybe they went for 2 and they would have lost. So there's a world here for him where the Chiefs could have been 0-3. It's not that crazy to think. So right now we are high on the Chargers. We're impressed with their defense. They were winning at Pittsburgh in that game in the second half. Very impressive. And then Herbert goes out of the game. So don't sleep on the Chargers here this week against the Chiefs. I expect them to actually win the game, provided that they have their cadre of players, the offensive lineman and Herbert on the field. But we think that's going to be a close game. And on our model, we like the spread with the Chargers getting the points at home.
Okay. Next question comes from Zeej. Stick with Anthony Richardson and any waiver wire tight ends that you like.
You have to stick with Richardson because he has the rushing upside. You did not draft Anthony Richardson thinking he's going to complete 68% of his passes. That's not who Anthony Richardson is. But you did draft him because you could get 60 to 100 rushing yards and a touchdown any individual week. So you have to stay with him. As far as tight end, just be careful because it's such a shallow position that there is someone out there who right now is not on any rosters probably because he's hurt, who could make a huge difference, and that's TJ Hawkinson with the Vikings. He's expected to come back sometime in October. Last year, he was among the top 3 tight ends in fantasy points per game. You have a good quarterback in Sam Darnold. Jordan Addison is hurt. Jalen Naylor is the second option. So Hawkinson's going to step right back in to a big target share, and he may be available because no one wanted him because he was out for the first half of the year. That's a difference maker at a fantasy position that's extremely shallow.
It's a great point. Vikings are looking like a real contender this year. I think it's a shock to say, but it's absolutely the truth. All right, last question here comes from Michael. Says, which team's DVOA does not reflect how good or bad that you think that they are?
Yeah, we look at total team DVOA. We pull this up on the site and go through it. And right now, your top teams, Buffalo, New Orleans, Seattle, Minnesota, Baltimore. The team that's fraudulent to me is New Orleans. I think New Orleans has hit some big plays. They hit a bad Dallas team on a good day and crushed them. They hit Carolina, who is a shell of themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if that second matchup's a lot closer. I don't think New Orleans is the second best team in the NFL, and I think that they're going to regress at some point soon. On the bottom 6 teams, Tennessee, Jacksonville, Carolina, Cleveland, Vegas, and Miami. The team that stands out to me is Jacksonville. Jacksonville's defense was very good against Miami in week 1. They would have won that game if ETN does not fumble. Jacksonville in week 2 played well against the Browns, couldn't get the ball in the end zone. Last night, they had a lot of injuries, turnovers, gave it away. I think Jacksonville's pretty decent, and I think their run defense is solid. They need to get healthy in the secondary, and any offense with Trevor Lawrence and Evan Ingram and Travis Etienne and Christian Kirk, it's too many weapons. I think they're going to get it right. Right now, they are the 5th worst team per DVOA. I expect them to improve.
Awesome stuff, Mike. I want to share one more little tidbit from FTN. And just to give folks an idea of what you get with Stats Hub, this is another type of thing you're not going to find other places. And this is a big part of why I'm a subscriber. So if you look right here, I'm hovering over WAP percentage. What is WAP percentage? No, it is not meant to be a slur. It is wide open rate. And so what does that say here? It says that the Detroit Lions are number 1 in the NFL on a defensive perspective in terms of leaving receivers wide open. I don't know that most people would know that. I certainly didn't know that before I looked it up. The Seahawks are number 3. So you're getting 2 of the 3 top teams in terms of making you earn it through the air through 3 weeks of the season. And I think you could argue that, Detroit has faced a tougher slate of offenses. So for them to do this is something to pay attention to and something to respect. It is worth noting the Patriots, number 5 on that. So Brock Purdy and his injured wide receiver room, also only 5.2% wide open rate for the Patriots. That's something else to look at. If I scroll down, let's see where the 49ers are. Mike, 26th. 12.4% of the time on dropbacks, there are wide open players. That's not an easy thing. And honestly, Mike, for the 49ers, it's their run defense that is really the issue, but it's also now becoming their pass rush, their ability to cover as well. It's an issue. And so this is why, folks, if you have not already, I highly, highly recommend you take advantage of this promo code HBAM, to get 15% off of FTN Plus or greater subscription. That's why I'm a subscriber. You get DVOA, you get Stats Hub, you get access to the Discord channel where you can ask questions about fantasy, you can ask questions about betting, and you get access to the model as well if you want to dabble in any of that. So it's the best deal out there by far. Really, really great data that I use every week. Really, honestly, I use it multiple times a day. So highly recommend it. And Mike, with that, anything that you've got before we let you go for the week?
No, great call out there with the data. Sure, we were laughing and affected by Tutu Atwell streaking down the field late against that San Francisco defense. So there are vulnerabilities there. Can the Patriots take advantage? That's the question. But game of the week, Brian, real excited. Week 4, Lions, Seahawks. Great opportunity for Seattle, and you're playing with house money. You lose a close game and it's in your 3-1, no problem. But you win this game and you maintain at least a 2-game lead on the rest of the division. Seahawk fans have to be happy.
Absolutely. And let's celebrate collectively. Absolutely no internet problems. Just clean, beautiful, crisp pictures and sound of Mike Randle. It's amazing.
I threatened the Optimum people. They came by. Our wires are underground here in New Jersey. There's always shady stuff going on in New Jersey, Brian. You understand that. Sopranos, you know how it is. But we're good to go. Everything's all set.
All right. Follow him at Randle Rant, and make sure you head over to FTN Fantasy to get your subscription using HBAM as your promo code. Mike, it's a pleasure as always. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Brian. I love it. Thanks so much.
Awesome. All right. That was Mike Randle of FTN Fantasy. Always great to catch up with Mike. Always great to get an outside perspective. And I mean, I could go through some other numbers with you all here. One of the ones I look at, and I'll even go back to sharing. Why not? Because I'm sure you guys are kind of curious. One of the other numbers that I look at every week is, let's make this bigger, is zone versus man coverage. And so if I say, who plays the highest rate of zone coverage in the NFL? It's the Steelers at 69%. And if I look at wanting to see the highest rate of man coverage, it's the Titans at 55. The Jets are next. New England is high up there. This was another man team. But interestingly, a couple teams show up in the top 10. Not sure if you guys are able to see this well. I'll zoom in for you a little bit. This is, I'll show you a trick. If you are a Stats Hub member, if you click on one of these guys and you say pin to, oh wait, it is pinned. If I just do this, then there we go. So the Seahawks, number 9 in the NFL in man coverage rate, 36.6%. The Lions, number 10 at 35.5. So this is a game where Geno Smith and Ryan Grubb and DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba are going to get more man coverage than they will in most games. And that's generally done good by the Seahawks and Geno Smith. So if you're of the belief that the Seahawks need to put up some points in this game to have a chance, I think there's a really good reason to believe that that's going to happen. When you look at the Seahawks being that high, that's interesting. And if I go back to, I'm kind of curious, if I go back to last year, so I'm going to go back to last year, and we're going to see man coverage rates for last year. Baltimore was number 5 at 51.6. So as a percentage so far, the Seahawks are playing less man coverage than the Ravens were with Mike Macdonald. I'm curious if that'll stay, if that'll keep going, or if it will change. But, you know, for right now, the Seahawks are number 9 in the NFL in that number. In general, man coverage rates are down across the league. That's also something I'm going to talk to Mike Macdonald about next time I get a chance to talk to him. Let's take a look one more second at DVOA. Before I get into, I've got some Mike Macdonald sound I'm going to react to in a second from his press conference yesterday. And if I look at defense versus receiver on FTN Fantasy, first of all, great to see the pass defense rank there for the Seahawks. But for defending wide receiver ones, the Seahawks are number 2. Where are the Lions? They are number 12. So the Lions have done relatively well against wide receiver ones. How have they done against wide receiver 2s? Well, Lions are 26th in the NFL in defending wide receiver 2s. This is something to pay attention to, and something I've already called out that I think there's a question mark that someone like Jackson Smith-Njigba, someone like Tyler Lockett could take advantage of. What about defending wide receiver 3s? Well, Lions are 21st in the NFL in defending wide receiver 3s. What about tight ends? Tight ends, Noah Fant and A.J. Barner got off the schneid last week. Detroit ranks 10th. So they've done better against tight ends than some of the other teams they face. And what about defending running backs out of the backfield as receivers? Seahawks are number 2 in the NFL in this number, which matters when you're going up against Jahmyr Gibbs. They absolutely use their receivers, their running backs as receivers. The Lions, though, number 4. So they have done pretty well. And so if you do get Kenneth Walker back, maybe he's not going to be as big of a factor out of the backfield as you might hope. But I'd love to see Kenneth Walker and that speed show up against on turf against this Lions defense. I think that good things will come from that. So again, folks, if you haven't already, use the HBAM promo code, get 15% off. You will not regret it. I telling you, I use it all the time. It's fantastic to have. All right, let's talk about some Mike Macdonald sound from yesterday. There was a few things that jumped out to me in the press conference at the VMAC. And the first question I asked Mike Macdonald, one of the things I've noticed about Mike Macdonald is he is obviously a savant when it comes to the X's and O's, and in terms of game planning and in terms of just being a super detail-oriented, smart coordinator and coach. I haven't heard as much about the mental aspect and the mindset and managing the emotions of your team. I think he does that in an unspoken way by being a very even-keeled guy. But I asked him yesterday, when you have a team that's 3-0, undefeated, you're going in to play a Monday night football game, prime time for the first time this season. How do you approach mindset? How do you keep your team from being a little bit out over their skis? And his answer was interesting. Here's what he said.
I think the tape is gonna tell the story. I mean, we're in a great position where we've done enough to win each game that we've played. There's a lot of great stuff on tape, but we're also at the beginning stages of this team and who we're going to become. and the guys know that. It's very clear when you watch the tape where we need to improve, and there's a great opportunity for us to improve. So I think the message is let's take advantage of this opportunity that we have, that we have the opportunity to learn so much about who we are, how we're going to grow, our operation throughout the week, how do we prepare, and we can be so much better. So again, it's so early in the season. We're in a great position. Obviously, it's way better than the opposite, and so we're excited about that. But there's a sense of urgency too on where this football team needs to go.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that answer, and also some insights into what's going on behind the scenes. I think the biggest part of that answer from Mike Macdonald was two things, I'll say. One, he didn't really talk about emotions or mindset. It's not something that it seems like is top of mind for him or something he's going to tackle through words. The thing that, number two, the thing that he's going to lean on there is the film will tell you where you are. And I love that as a mentality. And I think that this ties back to kind of Tell the Truth Monday from Pete Carroll, right? He would show you as a team where you were and what was going well and what wasn't. And so you couldn't hide from it. You couldn't maybe get too far out in front. Mike Macdonald doesn't necessarily have a catchy name for it, but that's what he just said. He just said, the film tells us where we are, and there's things that the team can see very clearly that are not where they should be. And so I think that that's a really great tool, and it must be like a touchstone for any great coach to just come back to the film and be like, hey, we are not right in this particular way. He talked later in the press conference. I didn't clip that part of it, but he talked about that he was happy with the way that they played against all the screens, the wide receiver screens that the Dolphins like to do. That was something they really focused on and was happy with that. But there were some gaps in coverage, too much space that is going to be a point of emphasis for them this week. And so he said also there's going to be some things that he's sure the Dolphins are going to look at and say, man, we could have had them there. And so even when it doesn't show up on the box score, it shows up on the film. And so I think that was just a great kind of insight into the way Mike Macdonald is going to approach handling his team and them getting too high or too low. Another question here, I think on everybody's mind is, where are we with that right guard position? It wasn't good. Both guard positions were not good. And so the question was asked about where is he with the right guard rotation, and here was his answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the same answer, until we start fortifying that spot. So it's a week-to-week thing right now. I think Christian deserves an opportunity to go compete a little bit more. How much so, we'll kind of let the practices decide at this point.
So he's pretty clearly saying Christian Haynes should get an opportunity to compete more. I don't know that says as much about Christian Haynes as it does about Anthony Bradford. And he has not, to this point, mentioned anything about Laken Tomlinson being in the conversation for whether he's going to be rotated. So this is an Anthony Bradford, Christian Haynes conversation at this point. I don't think it really matters which guard. You just got to find one and get some better play. But this is a challenging spot if you're going to go in, again, Monday Night Football, nationally televised game, on the road against a good team that blitzes a lot. Is that the best place for Christian Haynes to get his, first significant snaps? Probably not. I mean, it's not what you'd choose. Do they have a choice? Yeah, I do. I think they have a choice. I think they could decide to say, we're going to give Anthony Bradford one more week and we'll go from there. But my guess is they're going to get Christian Haynes on the field against the Lions. We will find out. if it's as far as getting a start, that would be a pretty seismic change week 4. But I just have to wonder if we're going to see Christian Haynes get a lot more snaps. And if he plays well in a series, maybe he doesn't come out this time. But again, you watched the film with me against New England. Go back 1 week to this show. The second part of the show, I go through Christian Haynes' film. He gave up 2 quarterback hits. One of them cost the Seahawks a touchdown. DK Metcalf was wide open. Geno Smith was going to hit him. And instead, Christian Haynes gave up a quarterback hit that almost turned into an interception. So everyone like, get Christian Haynes in there. I get it. I think we'd all love that to be the answer and just solve things. Generally speaking, when coaches they see the same issues we see and more. If they see this problem at right guard and they are not putting Christian Haynes in, then I think you got to be worried that Haynes may be a bigger problem than Anthony Bradford, if you can believe that. And so, yes, sometimes change for change's sake is good. At this point, I just want to I want to see that position get better. I'm not going to say Anthony Bradford's never going to be able to figure it out, but it's a challenge. It is a challenge right now, no doubt about it. But interesting to hear from Coach that he expects Christian Haynes to get bigger chance. The last clip I wanted to play from Coach yesterday, I wanted to ask him a little bit of a different question, which was, you know, if you are now at week 3 in the NFL season as a head coach for the first time, you've had a chance to kind of get acclimated to the rhythms of the week and the schedule. So I asked Coach, what are the things that have of your new responsibilities? You know, obviously he was a defense coordinator already. So what of the new things that you get to do as a head coach have been things that you've enjoyed the most? And what have been the biggest challenges? And you'll hear him at the beginning kind of chuckle at the notion of there's things that he has liked the most.
I can answer the tougher part a little easier. It's just managing your time. It's just I'm used to a certain cadence from being a defensive coordinator, and now your job description is a little bit different. And so as a staff, we're getting used to like the cadence of the week, what the expectations are, what type of information we need to generate, and then I'm kind of playing catch-up mode. So. But it's all good. We're growing every week as a staff, and we got a fun group and a great group of people working with us that make the journey enjoyable. So I appreciate that about our coaches. I just think to answer the better thing is like we got great people in the building. It's fun to come to work every day. I love our players. They've responded and then some on everything we ever asked them to do, and I just got a lot of faith in them, man. They just keep answering the bell every challenge we give them. The mentality's been there, so we got work cut out for us moving forward, but we got the right guys for the job.
What did you guys hear in that answer? I'll tell you what I heard. I heard that there's not really anything that he has liked about that he gets to do as a head coach that he didn't get to do before. Like, there's nothing obvious. He definitely said at the beginning, it's easier to answer the tougher part than it is to answer the things that have been enjoyable. That's interesting to me. I don't think that means he regrets it or he doesn't like the job. I don't think that's it at all. But I think for a guy that loves coaching, scheming, game planning, getting into the details, watching tape, coaching up the guys, the reality is being a head coach is a step away from that. Even if you are still calling the defensive plays, by necessity, you cannot be as involved or do as much of those things as you did before because you've got other responsibilities, including, I was positive he was going to say talking to the media. And maybe that was what went in his mind, but he didn't want to be a jerk. I mean, I almost gave it to him in my question. I was going to say, like, other than talking to the media, but, you know, he's got to do these things that for him are not direct lines to winning. They're not as tangible connections to winning a football game, to strategically influencing the outcome of a game. And that's an adjustment. And it's an adjustment pretty early on. He's the youngest head coach in the NFL. A lot of times people get to witness this for longer than he has. He's getting to experience it for the first time at 37. So, you know, I found that answer interesting. I think, of course I believe that he loves the people, he loves coming to work, he loves the players. I don't think any of that was inauthentic. I just think that that's kind of a little bit of an easy answer, and that's not really new being a head coach. It's new in the sense that it's a new team and it's a new city, and, you know, so he's gotten to know new people, so I'll give him that. But if he was here as a defensive coordinator, he'd have the same access to people and experiences there. So, you know, it's something I'm kind of going to be curious about over the years, which I think he's going to be here for a long time. Over the years, like, how does that change? What parts of being the leader of the whole thing from a coaching perspective gets to be more enjoyable for him? So, yeah, those were the clips that I had from Mike Macdonald yesterday that kind of stood out to me and I wanted to share with all of you. I was debating whether usually I try to get my power rankings done before the show. Did not get a chance to do that today for a few different reasons. Was debating about whether to do my power rankings live, to actually do the calculations live. It'll be pretty boring to watch because I'll have to be copying and pasting some stuff and focusing on what I'm doing to get the calculations. If you think that, if you want to just hang out, let me know. No feelings hurt because I want to do it either way. If you guys want to hang out, let me know. Otherwise, I'll end here and we will reconvene tomorrow. I've got some great guests coming up. Tomorrow we've got Big Ray's Rewind is back. So Big Ray's going to talk, and he's going to talk a little bit about defense for the first time. So looking forward to doing that with Big Ray tomorrow. I am working on, we've got Real Hawk Talk tomorrow night, Wednesday night. I'm working on getting Golden Tate on the show. Golden and I have been going back and forth, trying to find a time that works. Would love to talk to him this week as a former Lion, former Seahawk. So, yeah, I will hopefully get that squared away and let you know when that happens. And then Friday, we got the Mike Sando show. Saturday, we've got the Real Seahawks Saturdays with Jeff Simmons. Sunday, I will be on the road. I will be on the road to Detroit. So we will do a morning show, or we'll do a show. Not sure exactly when, but would love to do that. All right. So I'm scrolling back to see someone was trying to make a spreadsheet based on rankings. You want to see the math. I see Do It Live, Thomas Jones. I'm assuming, Thomas, that would be reference to the power rankings. All right, I'm going to take a risk. I think this is going to be very boring for most people, and I guess the answer is you guys can jet. If you want to jet, no offense. I'll probably cut this part out of the audio podcast. But if you're interested, I will hang out. I won't be able to talk and do this the whole way because I have to kind of concentrate on a couple of things. I will I will kind of show you a couple of things, but it's really ugly and I don't try to make anything look good. So I'm not going to really share my screen as I do this, but the first thing I do here. So again, if you want to jet. Otherwise, I'm going to do what I do anyway on the show. And there is a small chance I will have to stop anyway if my sick kid wakes up, and I have to get him ready for the day. All right. So first things first. So my power rankings are based off of a few primary numbers. Passer rating on offense, passer rating on defense. EPA per rush on offense, EPA per rush on defense, points per game on offense, points per game on defense. So differentials. Basically, my power rankings are differential based on how your defense is doing on certain things versus your offense. Then I have a strength of schedule modifier that I drop in there. So what I have to do is I go to a bunch of different sites here to get that information. And it's kind of annoying because for a few reasons. One, not they're not all in one place, so it makes it a little bit annoying to come up with. But if I go to, I think I'm going to go to Pro Football Reference today for getting passer rating. I like Pro Football Reference. It's got, for each season, it's got a lot of numbers available to you. I scroll down to the passing offense. I sort by team. So the other thing that's a little bit annoying is that not every site uses the same alphabetical order for three specific teams: Las Vegas, Los Angeles Chargers, and Los Angeles Rams. So I have to also pay attention to make sure I get the right sort order here. But I just have grabbed passer ratings for all teams in the NFL, and then I drop it in to passer ratings for offense. The Seahawks, by the way, 93.8 cumulative passer rating on the season. So I've got passer rating in there for offense. I'm going to go ahead and grab it for defense now. So team defense, sort that alphabetically, grab those guys, and let's drop these in here. So get the passer rating. Whoops. Well, I can get the points against. So I grabbed the wrong thing. Let me get, where's passing defense? There we go. So we're going to grab passer rating for defense. And I'm going to drop this in. So Seahawks. Any guesses on what passer rating the Seahawks have allowed so far this year? It's beautiful. 67 is the answer. Passer rating on defense. That is one of the best out there. The Bears have allowed 66.2. I think that's the only team that is lower than the Seahawks. So the passer rating differential for the Seahawks, pretty good. 26.7 is their passer rating differential. Now let me get points scored and points allowed. Just going to grab that. And we are going to copy this first and paste it in there. Vegas Chargers Rams. Make sure I've got that. Vegas Chargers Rams. Cool. All right. Always got to double check. So points against. The Seattle Seahawks are going to look good here. Seahawks allowed 14.3 points a game, which is fantastic. And now I'm going to grab points for. Not as good, but still good. I did, when I was looking at FTN last night and DVOA, I went to see, they have a schedule ranking for the teams that you have faced, both on offense and on defense. Do you want to guess what schedule ranking the Seahawks have as far as their offense? Like, how tough of a schedule have the Seahawks faced on offense this year? If you like, oh, sorry, wrong way. On defense, what's the difficulty level of the offenses that the Seahawks defense has faced? Because right, they've faced no good quarterbacks. This is the conversation. Well, it's dead last. 32nd. They have faced the easiest slate of offenses in the NFL, according to DVOA so far. So all the rumors are true that the Seahawks have had a very easy slate of offenses to go against so far. No team in the NFL has had it easier than the Seahawks defense in terms of who they have faced. So big deal there. And then let's see. I'm through dropping in points allowed and points for. Next, we got to go to running backs still don't matter.com. It's rbsdm.com. This is Ben Baldwin's site. Kudos to Ben. Ben and I have some differences in terms of how to go about being a personality online, but I really do appreciate the data that he makes available and utilize it regularly. So challenge here, I'm going to grab the Rush EPA for offense. And this is one of those sites where I have to change the sort order. So it's got to be Vegas first, then the Chargers, then the Rams. So let's grab this row and move it up here. And then this row and move it up here. All right. So Rush EPA. I'm going to grab that. And I'm going to drop that in. This is for offense. So let's do that. And then we're going to do defense. We're getting close, folks. Only a couple more numbers left. I'm sure this is fascinating for all of you. And, enjoy. All right. So now we're going to get it for EPA, Rush EPA for defense. And I'm going to drop that in here. And we got to reorder again. We're going to make sure that Vegas is first, and then the Chargers are next, and the Rams are third. Okay, got that in the right order. Rush EPA, copy that, and we're going to drop that in here. Paste and get that. All right, so we've got the general formula, and now last thing I got to do is I've got to get strength of schedule. So for this, I use the teamrankings.com strength of schedule is what I utilize. And I'm going to grab that now. And, is there a better strength of schedule out there? Probably. I don't know. I don't really care. This works for me. So we've got a strength of schedule, and this is helpful because this is what modifies a team like the Seahawks down. And if you're curious, the Seahawks have the easiest strength of schedule in the NFL so far. So they get the biggest negative modifier on their power ranking. So again, none of this is my bias. This is just my bias is maybe deciding what the formula should be. but generally speaking, doesn't really matter what I think. The power rankings are going to tell us what the answers are. All right. You guys are going to get the very first information about the power ranks, the Hawk Blogger Week 3 power rankings after all the Monday night games are over. Who do you think is the number one team? Who do you think is the number one team in the NFL via my power rankings after 3 weeks? I'll give you guys a second while I start to make this pretty or prettier. So I think there's some pretty good guesses. Last week, for what it's worth, week 2, number one team in the NFL was the Saints. Number 2 was the Bills. 3 was the Vikings. 4 was the Bucks. 5 was the Chargers. The Seahawks were 10th last week. So I see a bunch of guesses: Minnesota, Chiefs, Vikings, Bills. The correct answer is the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are the new number one in the NFL, according to my power rankings. And I see there's some questions coming in. I can't really look at questions and do this at the same time. I will try to look at questions in a second and give you guys some answers. Minnesota is number 2. The Saints are dropped down to number 3. Chargers are number 4. The Packers number 5. The Steelers number 6. Your Seattle Seahawks climb up to number 7 in the rankings. This despite the fact that they have the worst strength of schedule in the NFL. So if I go back, and I don't put all of this in the article that I'll write, so I'll give you guys a little additional insight. If we did not include the strength of schedule, if we just, we did not include the strength of schedule, then the Seahawks would rank, well, they would be, I think, in the same spot. They would be in the same spot. So they would be there right now. They are barely above the Jets in terms of their team strength. They have a 30.8 team strength. The Jets have a 29.8. So they're barely above. If you took the strength of schedule out, the Seahawks go up to a 42. Now, what do these numbers mean? They don't really mean anything. They just kind of relative against each other. It would be 42 to 31 spread between the Seahawks and the Jets if you didn't have strength of schedule in there. So strength of schedule subtracts quite a bit from the Seahawks. I think someone asked what I do in terms of weighting. I've kind of played with this over the years. I take the team ranking strength of schedule and I multiply it by 3. So the Seahawks have a negative 3.8 strength of schedule. So you can tell there that, subtracts out a bunch from their, basically 12 from their ranking, or close to it. All right. Next thing I do is I look at what is the 1 week differential between the power rankings this week and a week earlier. And the Seahawks gained only 1.2 points in their ranking. So relatively stable. What does that mean when you have a team that is relatively stable in their team strength, but they move up? Well, that means a lot of other teams move down, and that dropped a lot. So who lost the most in terms of their strength? Well, I will share my screen so you guys can see what I've got going on here. And I'm gonna say ignore this for now. Oops. Well, whatever. I'm going to show you my screen, but I will say ignore the 3 week differential. let me zoom in a little bit here. All right. So this is where we end up. Like I said, let me just hide this. Yeah, there we go. So you can see that the Saints absolutely just fell in terms of their strength. They were way ahead because they had 2 blowout wins. But for them to go from way ahead to third tells you how badly they did. I'm guessing they dropped more than anyone else, but you had a lot of teams. Vegas dropped a lot. Jacksonville dropped a lot. Houston dropped a ton. Huge step back for the Texans. Arizona dropped a lot. I think they were a top 10 team last week. They're down there in the middle, kind of a mid team. I think that's what the Cardinals are. I think they are a mid team. I don't think they're bad. I don't think they're good. I think they're a mid team. And I do think that they're competitive with a team like Philadelphia, who I also think is a mid team, although they gained a lot of strength this week. Denver gained a ton of strength. Who gained the most? Might be Denver. 36. No, the Giants gained 42.5. Well, Carolina gained 84. Whoa. Yes, Carolina certainly came from absolute depths of the rankings, maybe some of the lowest rankings I've ever calculated before, to still being last in the NFL, but being a little bit better. Rams still second to last. The 49ers lost to the second to lowest team in my rankings. As far as who the Seahawks have beat, they have beat the 28th ranked team on my rankings. They have beat the 24th ranked team and the 20th. Who have the Lions beat? The Lions have beat the 15th ranked team. They have beat, where's Tampa? The 10th ranked team. So Tampa is high up there. And they have beat the 31st ranked team. So, yeah, I mean, the Lions, where do the Lions show up? They're 12th here. And if you're kind of curious, like, why are the Lions behind the Seahawks? Well, there's a few things. Lions have a negative passer rating differential. They have an 80 passer rating on offense. They've given up an 83.3 passer rating on defense. The defensive passer rating is not bad. The offensive passer rating is. So they have thrown some interceptions. They've had some issues. The passer rating is really pulling Detroit down. As far as point differential goes, the Seahawks have the magic point differential. If you are a plus 10 or greater on point differential, you're in really good shape. And the Seahawks have scored 24.3. They've allowed 14.3. So point differential, good for the Seahawks. Not so great for the Lions. 20.7 to 17.7. So only a, 3-point differential, +3 for them per game versus +10 for the Seahawks. So those are two areas that are particularly advantageous for the Seahawks in this model, in these rankings, over the Lions. So I think there are some questions. I will answer those before I wrap, and then I gotta go. Smokehawk asks, do wins or losses figure into the model? Not at all. Well, that's not true. The statistic of a win or a loss does not enter into the model. But what does? Points. Point differential. It is pretty hard to be a winning team and have a negative point differential, or be a losing team and have a positive point differential. So point differential is a huge part, one of the primary parts, a foundational part of this calculation, and that is accounted for. And so I think that tells a lot. Let me see. I think there was a bunch of questions probably why. Ed Chan says, the accountant in me respects that you calculate your power rankings mathematically, Brian. Well, I appreciate that. Because if you do it just based on vibes, I don't have a lot of respect for it, to be honest. I think that could be a fun conversation, but I'm too emotional of a fan to trust myself to accurately, assess these things. So I just like to see what the numbers say and then react to it. Let's see. Were there other questions while I was doing this? We talked about the weight of strengths of schedule. Honestly, curious how you can copy the data so quickly. Yeah, I just Zach was asking if I want to show my screen. I chose not to show my screen in terms of the sheet. It's just so ugly. It's just all these numbers. But yeah, it's a typical spreadsheet, and I've got formulas that are calculated for, assessing the differential between these numbers. And then, I've got a certain weighting in my proprietary algorithm. It's not an algorithm, it's a model that comes up with the final score. So it's just this minus this times that, whatever. It's nothing exciting. All right, I think we're going to call that. So your Seahawks, at least in my power rankings, will jump to 7th, which is good. The Bills are the new number 1, and I think that's the right one. And I'll just say overall, this is the time by week 3 that these rankings have historically been pretty high in terms of efficacy. And it's got, I think generally you can bank on at least 7 of the top 10 teams in my power rankings being in the playoffs at the end of the season. And so if we look at that, who are the top 10 teams? It is Buffalo, Minnesota, New Orleans, the Chargers, Green Bay, Pittsburgh, Seattle, Jets, Baltimore, and Tampa. If there's 3 teams in there that aren't going to make the playoffs, who would they be? I would guess the Saints would be maybe one of them. I don't know. I think this could be a 9. I mean, Seattle would be another team that people could guess. If you weren't a Seahawks fan, that would probably be one that you'd guess, given that they've played the easiest schedule so far. I think this could be a 9 out of 10 kind of year. I've had years where it's 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. By week 3, the top 10 of my rankings are close to perfect. This could be one of those years. And it's kind of an interesting list, right? Like, Buffalo's not a surprise. Kansas City's not there. The 49ers aren't there. The Rams aren't there. The Cowboys aren't there. The Eagles are not there. So, there's a lot of power teams, at least from what people have thought, that don't show up on this list. Pittsburgh being 6, I think Mike Tomlin's doing a heck of a job. Heck of a job, man. That defense is legit. The Jets, I don't believe in that team. Sorry. But Baltimore's got their hands full. I don't know. Baltimore's a team I just wonder about making the playoffs this year. But yeah, we will see. We will see. Thank you all for hanging out with me while I did that. Hopefully you enjoyed listening or watching some of that. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at HawkBlogger. If you have not already, make sure you head over to ftnfantasy.com. Use promo code HBAM for HawkBlogger Mornings. HBAM gets you 15% off of all of you can get the Stats Hub data, the DVOA data, the Discord channels, all that stuff, the betting information, the fantasy football information. I'm a subscriber. I think you should be too. Less than $8 a month, FTN Plus or greater. So really appreciate all of you. I will see you all soon. Until then, take care. This has been episode 184 of Hawk Blogger Mornings.